Steve. I was wondering if we could talk about glass cutters today and a little bit more on each cutter. You know, sometimes when a student you're learning out, your teacher kind of gives you one cutter and you just sort of gravitate towards that. And I figured we could kind of talk through each one and why one might choose a cutter over another.
Great.
You like sharing?
I'd love to tell you about it. It's a passion of mine. It's been in my life since 1975 when we started this company. And I appreciate you inviting me to be here to talk about them. Yeah, back in 1975, my grandfather actually had retired and he was doing glass cutting and he was using these steel wheel cutters. And somebody approached him with this cutter from TOYO, Japan, and they weren't in America yet. And they had this idea to use tungsten carbide, which at the time was revolutionary because they were only using steel and they would wear out. And they were those little green cutters and they were hard. They were hard to hold and hard to grip. And they had brought him this tungsten carbide cutter and it looked almost just like this. You can see how fat that is, right? I mean, compared to the TC10 today or the TC17, the handle, yeah, it's a little bit different, but still pretty similar, believe it or not.
Yeah.
The other revolutionary thing that they integrated with it was self-oiling, which before 1975, when TOYO brought this to us, there was no self-oiling cutter. This was the first self-oiling cutter available on the market. So you combine better metallurgy, and my grandfather was a metallurgist, it turned out, which is part of the reason he got involved with them, and the self-oiling feature, and my grandfather was in heaven. He was making stained glass lamps and all these windows and all sorts of stuff, and he was out in his shop for hours and hours, and when he got this, it just became a pleasure, and he's like, this is amazing. So even though he was retired, he said, you know, this is something I kind of want to get involved with, and my father and my mother and a cousin and my grandfather started this company. And so what started out with this handle, and it's a little hard to hold. You know, when I was taught to cut glass, I was taught to hold it like that. Yeah, you hold it like a claw, which is a little bit funky and cumbersome, but that's how you'd hold it. And then you make your score and kind of do something like that, right?
Oh my gosh.
But it's still not that hard. I mean,
Well, if you have hand strength.
Yeah, a little hand strength, but that is a little harder. And it did have this wide head originally, which now if you go to a flat glass shop, you know, people that just do normal windows and things like that, you'll see these cutters everywhere. This is what they use.
That's their favorite.
And they use this wide head, particularly because when you cut against a bar like this, then it sticks to the bar a little bit nicer
Okay.
than if you have a small head like this. There's a little chance it can wobble. Not much, but a little bit. So that's the difference between the wide head and the skinny head. Actually, they both will do the same exact thing.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, thank you for sharing some of your family history tied to your awesome cutters. It's kind of crazy to hear a little bit of the backstory of such a revolutionary tool in the glass world.
Well, I appreciate that, yeah. And actually today, the company's run by my brother Jeff and I, so, and it's carried on. And a couple of our kids may take it over at some point, we'll see. So after that, my grandfather was getting a little older and he was having some trouble holding the cutter. So Japan really developed this for the most part. My grandfather had some input. They made a few modifications and then it came out.
Okay.
And then going forward, my grandfather also was a woodworker. And I have some beautiful furniture in my house that he made. He was also a self-taught electrician. He owned a plumbing fixture factory originally. Wow. He was an engineer. I mean, the guy was into a million different things. So he had trouble holding this and decided to fabricate a wooden handle that would mount right on this. And it looked a lot like that.
Interesting.
So that's how the pistol grip was developed, because he was having trouble. He's getting older. He still wanted to do glass. He needed something where his hand strength, which was diminishing, could be basically augmented by the tool, and he wouldn't have to stop working. So he developed this. And funny enough, around the same time, TOYO was also thinking about it and working on it. So they collaborated and came up with the modern day pistol grip. So
yeah, let's talk about this spread you have here. You've got a bunch of different cutters. They're all different shapes and sizes. In your hand, you have the pistol grip cutter, which you've touched a little bit on about, but you know, I'd love to see each one and talk about their names and how you hold them and
Absolutely.
What kind of special perks there are for using each of them?
Great. Well, let me get into that. So the pistol grip cutter is self-oiling, as are almost all of these minus one. And when you put oil in this, first of all, don't put too much oil in it.
Okay.
And just a little bit to just kind of
Why
maybe
is that?
fill it.
Why not fill it up all the way?
Why not fill it up all the way? Well, it's actually, I will say, if there's a mistake in the design of this, it's the size of that well. And when you put that much oil in it, the valve that keeps the oil back just isn't designed to hold back that much volume of oil. It's really just a little bit.
Well, I appreciate the honesty on, on the design flaw.
But it still works great. You put a little bit of oil in just to kind of fill the finger dips in there. And when you're ready to cut, you open the valve just a little bit. It's like putting your finger over a straw. So it allows, it'll keep the oil from flowing if you close it down, like your finger would over a straw. When you're ready to cut, you open it a little bit, it'll allow the oil to flow.
Very interesting. I find I like to use the pistol grip cutter because I don't have a lot of hand strength. Is that something that you find that people gravitate towards that cutter because of, or?
Absolutely. Like my grandfather was having trouble holding the cutter and he developed that handle. That's exactly why a lot of people like it. They feel like they can control the pressure, but with that also comes the opportunity to overscore glass, and that's something we'll talk about later, but you need to really control your strength. What you're looking for is a real clean score that doesn't pop with a lot of little white flakes. And so when you score it, some people will, I don't even put my hand on the blade. Sometimes you can put a finger on the blade. Some people put 2 fingers on the blade to kind of guide it.
Yeah.
The blade rotates, which bothers some people. And if you want to know why, it's kind of like a shock absorber. So if I'm cutting and I accidentally move my hand a little bit, it won't come offline, whereas if it's totally fixed. But if I want it to follow, I can, as long as I turn here, the blade will follow exactly where I'm going.
There's a reason for that wobble, is what you're saying.
That's right.
Okay, very interesting.
So after the pistol grip came out, we also started working on another cutter. Actually, the next one that's of a slightly different handle style was this Thomas grip. And it was developed by a guy named Cal Thomas, and it was fashioned after a leatherworking tool called a swivel knife.
It's funny you say that. I have a gal that helps me, and she went to school to be a shoemaker, and she saw the tool that I got that was given to me by you, and she said, we have something just like that with shoemaking. So very interesting. Yeah.
So this little Thomas grip is a little funky. Some people will put the handle right there between the thumb and forefinger and hold it. Some people will put the swoop up between their middle and forefinger and hold it like that.
Why would someone gravitate towards using that cutter?
It's just control. So great question. All these handle styles really, some people feel they get better control out of a different position that you're holding the cutter. And that's exactly what happens here. Some people like this little tiny thing. It just kind of fits in the palm of your hand. It fits between these fingers. You know, there's a couple different ways to do it. You could also do it like that.
Yeah, I can see how it can be kind of a versatile cutter on all the ways that you fit it in your fingers.
Yeah. So after having some success with that, we thought that was pretty neat. We moved on and we developed this custom grip cutter, and this is my personal go-to cutter. I use this one the most. And we call it the custom grip because the paddle itself, as you can see, well, a couple things about it. The paddle is designed much like the Thomas grip to fit in the palm of your hand. Just like that. And it allows me to take the strength of my whole arm and hand and use that, transfer that into the glass as I'm pushing. But I can also hold it like a pencil.
I can feel that. And in the case that I'd want a different grip, is this adjustable at all?
It is, hence the name the custom grip. Thanks for asking. So the way that happens is you take the little nut off, which is also where you put the oil in. And again, this one isn't quite prone to leaking like the pistol grip. You could fill this one. I wouldn't fill it past the little neck point. When you originally get the cutter out of the package, it's going to have this little collar down below, and that's what I call the second position. You can see how the paddle's now a little bit further away from the cutting head, right? I have small hands. I tend to put it in the first position with the paddle all the way down like that.
And then you'll just screw it back in, I'm assuming?
Yep. Some people have big hands. They want to get the paddle a little further away. And then the fourth position, you put the collar below and you put the paddle on top. Some people do that just to get it out of the way and they just want to cut with it like that.
Like almost a mini.
Some people, if they have giant hands, that'll give them the leverage from that point.
So this cutter's got a lot of great versatility for someone who might want to mix up cutting.
Right. The other fact that some people may not realize, this was the original cutter in the pattern world that had the tap wheel in it. This is where we introduced that tap wheel. And the tap wheel is that zipping sound you hear. Versus a smooth rolling wheel.
There's a slight difference, I do hear that.
And the tap technology is what that's doing. There's little grooves on the inside of this wheel, and it's tapping like a hammer drill so that the score goes deeper into the glass with less effort.
Very interesting. So what would make you want to have that technology in your cutter? Do you think it makes that big of a difference?
It absolutely does, especially on thick glass, and that's where we started with the tap wheel, was on our thick glass cutter, which goes up to 3/4 inch thick glass. And you want that score to go as deep as possible so it'll run as perpendicular as possible. What that also means is you can use a little less pressure on the glass when you're scoring. So your tool lasts longer and your hands get less tired.
Very interesting.
So I use it on all glass, and in fact, our pistol grip now only comes with the tap wheel. For that reason.
That's why I love it so much.
There you go. Multiple reasons. So that's the tap technology and the custom grip.
Okay.
So going through our other cutters, these are kind of variations on a straight barrel cutter. This is a slightly more ergonomic design, and it's real lightweight, right? It's acrylic, so very light, and it's also got some notched grooves in the handle so that if you were to hold it like a pencil, you can do that, and it just kind of fits your fingers real nicely.
You could really hold it in any sort of way.
Yeah. And this does have our smooth rolling wheel in it, but
interesting.
Yeah, and this is a slightly more economical option as well, so it's definitely less expensive than the pistol grip or the custom grip.
Yeah, and for someone who prefers to have their hands in a slightly different arrangement too, I could see that as more of a traditional style.
Right. And then the last two cutters that we've got here today, this is actually our dry wheel cutter right here. I'm gonna set that one down, even though the handle style is the same as the comfort grip, we call it. This is our dry wheel cutter. It's got the same tungsten carbide wheel.
Okay.
So if you never put oil in your cutters, this cutter will last just as long as any other cutter. It's got a real lightweight kind of wood.
It feels much lighter than I would think it would be.
Yeah, it's a plastic handle. It's got a wood grain texture and pattern to it. Okay. The head still swivels, and you know, this is the most economical cutter that we have. It's used in a lot of beginner kits.
Okay.
And it works wonderfully. And you can replace the heads on any of these cutters, so you can just buy a replacement head for any of these. The last cutter that we brought here today is our TC70, and this is our track wheel cutter, and it came out, it's the newest in the cutters. It came out about 3 to 4 years ago. The track wheel, on the outside of the wheel are little micro notches, much like putting snow chains on a tire.
Okay.
And the reason for that is some people find that when they're going to score glass, especially in a manufacturing situation with oil, the wheel won't start rolling right away. But with these little micro notches on the blade, starts rolling right away. And we recently ran into a gentleman who was cutting kaleidoscopes and couldn't figure out why he was having so much trouble. And he tried out this and he said, my wheel wasn't spinning and I was cutting with oil, and that solved the problem immediately. I've had no problems since. So it's a great little cutter, and the other difference about it is it's got the same acrylic handle as our comfort grip.
Okay.
But it's got the knurled little end, the brass end where the cutter attaches, and it does actually compress for the oil to be released.
Interesting.
On the comfort grip, there's no compression. It's not supposed to compress. There's a wick in there and it allows the oil to flow. This one has a valve that allows the oil to flow. So much different
technology.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's really our line of cutters. We have our circle cutter. We'll demonstrate that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But you know, out of all these different handle styles, I think we pretty much can find one that fits most people.
Yeah, it seems like there's a little bit of everything for everyone here, depending on what preference you have. But thanks for sharing all the cutters, and I'm excited to kind of experiment with you a little bit later, cutting up some glass. So thanks,
Great.
Steve.
Thank you.